Hey everyone, it's Naomi. Day 2 of our 5-day sprint. We're back in the saddle, back in the marathon of reading from the Geneva Bible, the Founders Bible, the Puritans Bible, Shakespeare's Bible. Greetings, everyone. And I will just start by saying, get ready, get yourself a cold drink or a cup of tea. I've got my tea right here because this is one of the longest chapters in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible. And it's detailed and it's, I'll just be honest, it's repetitive because it's going to tell the story of how the 12 tribes of Israel made each of them a special offering to Yahweh, and they're preparing to kind of leave the settlement, leave the camp, and resume their journey toward the Holy Land. And we've got a number of unfortunate events, as one commentator puts it, ahead of us. But everyone's getting ready for the journey. So let's see. I just want to kind of clear the air, clear my mind before I begin. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah. In other words, the Holy New Year has begun. I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to not, do work on a holy day like this, but I sort of feel like reading the Torah to all of you is in alignment with, one of the holiest days of the year. And also, honestly, I feel like I have to, more than ever, because I don't know if you've all been following this, but there's been horrible, Loki is licking my hands. Some people love it when their dogs lick them, but I don't really love it. You're so cute, but don't lick, honey. Oh God. All right. There's been a lot of horrible drama in the wake of, unfortunately, Tucker Carlson, whom I like, who I have a friendly texting relationship with him. I send him essays that I wrote, and we've had great conversations. But I'm very sad that he unfortunately took the occasion of a very blessed, important, grief-stricken ceremonial event, which was, of course, the memorial service for the late Charlie Kirk, and made a comment about hummus eaters in Jerusalem wanting to kill someone because they were telling the truth about them. And, a lot of Jews and a lot of Christians heard those comments very differently, really as if we're living in two worlds. Many Jews heard the language of 2,000 years of what's called blood libel, meaning the invocation of the fact that some Jews handed Jesus over to be crucified. That just is in the Gospels. There's no doubt about that in the Gospels, to the extent that the Gospels are, reflections of history about which there's debate. But, there was a real person named Yeshua, and he, according to other sources, really was crucified in that period of time. But, that happened. But blood libel is the act of saying the Jews killed Christ with the intention of whipping up, hatred and hostility toward Jews. And this happened throughout Europe for century after century after century. And what followed often was murder of us. I mean, there's just no nice way to say it. Russians, especially Cossacks, would get kind of whipped up by sermons about the Jews killing Christ. And then they would go burn the shtetl, burn the villages, burn people, lock them into barns, set the barns on fire with their animals, with their children, again and again and again and again. And there's an elaborate literature in Europe going back to the Middle Ages of very hideous kind of slanders of Jews, that they, abduct Christian children and use their blood to make matzah and torture them, and, horrible things that, again, justify murdering Jews. And I will note very often during those horrible pogroms or massacres, which took place in England and in Germany and in Czechoslovakia and in Russia, on and on and on. Like nowhere was free of it, right? Often the Jews' property was confiscated by the people who whipped up the blood libel. So that's a history that I would say every, minimally educated Jew in America knows. And it's a history that, someone as thoughtful and well-educated as Tucker Carlson should know. Now, that doesn't mean don't tell the truth about what the gospel says. Yes, members of the Sanhedrin, according to multiple gospels, handed over Yeshua to Pontius Pilate, who was the kind of deputy of Rome at that time in Judea. And Pontius Pilate said, do you want one of these criminals back or one of these accused men back? And they chose someone else, to redeem essentially, and handed over Yeshua to crucifixion. And then everyone interestingly forgets it was actually the Romans who crucified Yeshua. Now, we could talk about this all night, right? I'm not trying to whitewash history, but some Jews were in the Sanhedrin and handed Yeshua over. I will note in a context in which Rome murderously occupied and oppressed Judea, and none of the Jewish leaders had freedom or authority or autonomy. They were not the state. They were oppressed viciously by the state. And you've got to imagine a Judea and a Jerusalem at that time. And I got this from my Christianity basically 101 class in college, taught by a really distinguished biblical scholar named Edwin Meeks. I'm sorry, what did I just say? Meeks. But it was a time when Romans were crucifying, crucified convicts were all over the hills of Judea, surrounding Jerusalem. It was a very, very, very common torture and death sentence in that period. Rome did it to terrify and subjugate people like the Jews and others who were living in Judea and Samaria at that time. And it did terrify them. So you have to understand that this was a time when Judea was fully occupied. There was not a Jewish state. These were not, the Sanhedrin was like barely tolerated, barely allowed to survive. And I just want to give you that context. And I'm sure, they were scared. I'm not justifying the, murder of Yeshua, obviously, but you've got to understand a context in which all of the Jewish community could have been massacred by Rome. And they did massacre the Jewish community shortly thereafter with the destruction of the temple. They killed, everyone and sent the rest of them to exile. That really happened. So it's a context in which, yes, they shouldn't have done it, of course. Politically, one can imagine, that these Sanhedrin leaders would think this guy is stirring up so much chaos and rebellion from a Roman point of view, from a Roman imperial point of view. It is too risky. We've got to hand him over. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not, justifying it. I just think it's very important to understand this historical context. And it was the Romans who crucified him. They didn't have to. They could have let him go. The Sanhedrin had zero authority over Pontius Pilate. None. No authority. Pontius Pilate was completely in charge of the Sanhedrin, and Rome was in charge of Pontius Pilate. So, it was Roman soldiers who crucified Yeshua. It was Roman soldiers who mocked him. It was Roman soldiers who poked his side with a spear and put, vinegar, a sponge with vinegar on the tip of the spear for Yeshua to drink, mocking him, right, as he was tortured on the cross. I'm not saying that the Sanhedrin was blameless, but it's just very, very interesting that the whole political context, which was complicated as hell, is whitewashed, and the historical blame for killing the Son of God, rests only on all the Jews, not some Jews. And the other thing that it whitewashes, this approach, is the fact that Jesus was Jewish and his followers were Jewish and the disciples were Jewish. They were all Jews. Mother Mary, Jewish lady. Joseph, Saint Joseph now, Jewish guy, his earthly dad. His earliest teaching when he was a young boy was in the temple. His sermons were in synagogues, right? The Sermon on the Mount, it was Jews, and a handful of Samaritans and other kind of, more marginalized groups were the ones listening to him. His followers, every episode in the gospel, the raising of the dead, it was a Jew in a Jewish household. The water into wine, it was a Jewish wedding. So I literally have read so much disturbing bile and nonsense in my feed today and yesterday, from people who believe really crazy, sad, distorted things about Judaism and about Judaism's relationship to Christianity. So I just I don't know what some people are being taught about who Jesus was and where he came from. But yes, the Sanhedrin handed him over to the occupying, vicious, brutal force to solve a terrible problem, of a provocateur in a good way, right? That could have brought, a total massacre and exile on the whole Jewish community, which actually again happened, later. So they weren't paranoid. But it was Jews who were the first followers of Yeshua. It was Jews who were the first Christians. In fact, in the first century, there was a whole community called Jewish Christians. The women who saw the risen Jesus, Jewish ladies, the people they told, Jewish guys. So I'm just kind of sick, that people seem to be taught such nonsense in some churches. I'm sorry, I just have to say it. It's vicious nonsense, and it's unfortunate nonsense because, as Yeshua said, his teaching is grafted on the tree of the Torah. And in fact, in Matthew, he said, not a jot or tittle, meaning not one iota, not one punctuation mark of the law will be changed until the world passes away. And this is the law. What I'm reading to you is the law. It's the Torah. So that's what, in my understanding, Yeshua was a very, very brilliant, maybe son of God. I have no problem with that. Certainly Mashiach, which in Hebrew means anointed, like David was anointed, like the priests were anointed with oil. I have no problem with that. Maybe a miraculous being, like, maybe a great prophet, maybe a manifestation of God. I don't know. Nobody knows. But for sure, Yeshua the man, in his own words, came not to, reject Jewish law, not to reject the Torah, but to make it easier to understand, right? And simpler to observe and follow. And with everything that we've learned up until this journey, with all these books, now we're at number 7, I think that's so consistent with what Yahweh's struggle is with human beings. He keeps trying and trying and trying to, okay, here are just 10 commandments. All right, here are 7 commandments. Okay, don't worship the golden calf. Just like trying to give humans a manageable way for them to not, whore after their own eyes and hearts, as one of the Psalms puts it that I read tonight in synagogue. But to me, Yeshua is clearly like God's radical effort to simplify the Torah so that no one can misunderstand it and to make following him easier, right? Not 613 commandments, but love your brother and sister as yourself. But Yeshua is not departing from Judaism. He is radically going back to basics and radically making it available and reminding people it's not about the details of the law. Because by that time, yes, Judaism had become very kind of nitpicky about how you do things, right? And Yeshua came, and it's completely consistent with the character of God, as we've learned about him to date, to radically simplify everything so no one can misunderstand the point, which is to love each other, to look after the poor, to love God, to love your children, to be kind. Anyway, I am just diving right in. I took a nap today because I was really quite traumatized by what Tucker Carlson said, and I was traumatized by the incredibly anti-Semitic reaction of many, many, many people. And I use that word very carefully, right? It's not anti-Semitic to note that in the gospel, the Sanhedrin turned Yeshua over to Rome. But other gleeful ways of creating a binary and othering us as a result, that is hateful to us. And it is ignorant of Christianity's own roots on the tree that is Judaism, right? And I was just so depressed by this, especially because I've had threats against me by a crazy woman death threats, who thinks I'm, a Mossad agent. And so there's a whole, which I'm not, there's a whole narrative of the Jews did it, Israel did it, and we don't know yet who did it, right? And, all kinds of questions are out there. But I do see a crude and ignorant and hateful and evidence-free narrative forming, ranging from Candace Owen to, the latest thing Tucker Carlson said, to just people taking the cue on social media and other important conservative leaders, Christian leaders, being silent about it at a time when Jews are facing some existential threats of our own, right? And the hostages are still in Gaza. And yes, the bombing needs to stop of Gazans, but also, what a good moment to release the hostages as everyone's recognizing Palestine. This is not a time, and especially in the wake of a terrible death, like Charlie Kirk's, a murder, this is not the time to be whipping up division. It is the time to read the Old Testament, read the New Testament, join hands and call for unity and understanding. So I was so overwhelmed and traumatized by this, because these things are connected, right? Like, the Jews did it, evidence-free, the Jews did it, is not unrelated to a crazy woman in Canada saying, I'm going to go to New York to stop Naomi Wolf, deep state whore, Mossad agent, right? It's creating an environment in which that's okay. And anyway, I was just so overwhelmed. I lay down. I just almost couldn't, get up today. I was so shocked and depressed. And I felt this heaviness, almost like a dark weight, palpable. And it felt spiritual. So I'm diving into Numbers 7 to banish that darkness, all I can, not just for me, but for all of you guys. And if any of you, hate and fear Jews, please tune in, because I'm telling you, with these readings, I think one of the reasons I feel so motivated to, read through the Geneva Bible and then read the Hebrew to you, it's not for Jews, they can go to synagogue and read the Bible. It's partly so what it is, what your legacy is if you're Christian, even if you're Muslim, because these are sacred books to Muslims too. And also so that no one can misunderstand the relationship of Judaism to Christianity, or no one can keep lying about who Jews are and what they believe. All right. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Uncle Rico said Yeshua laid down his life for humanity. If he didn't have to die, he could have called on angels to rescue him. We are all responsible for his death. Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of Christians believe. And that's an area of Christian theology I can't even engage with, because I don't know it well. I'm not trained in it, and it's not my mission to understand that. It's just my mission to kind of explain who we are and also what was happening around Yeshua at the time that he taught. All right, so let's go on and just get started, because this is a pretty intense chapter. Let's go ahead and share my screen. And I really hope some of the people who were horribly, disgustingly abusive to me today will go ahead and tune in. I love them too. All right, so this is chapter 7. You can see the 16th century text. And some of you said yesterday that you like being able to see the text on screen. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. It's chapter 7. And as you know, these subheadlines are not in the text. The heads or princes of Israel offer at the setting up of the tabernacle and at the dedication of the altar as God speaks to Moshe from the mercy seat. That was the subheading, and now we begin. Now, when Moshe had finished the setting up of the tabernacle and anointed it and sanctified it and all the instruments thereof, and the altar with all the instruments thereof, and had anointed them and sanctified them, then the princes of Israel leads over the houses, over the houses of their fathers, that were the princes of the tribes, who were, it's very damaged text here, who were over them, that were honored of them, and brought their offering before the Lord, 6 counted chariots and 12 oxen, to 1 chariot for 2 princes, and for every one an ox, and they offered them before the tabernacle. And the Lord spoke unto Moshe, saying, take these of them, that they may be to do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and you shall give them unto the Levites, the Levies, to every man according unto his office. So Moshe took the chariots and the oxen and gave them unto the Levites. 2 chariots and 4 oxen he gave to the sons of Gershon according unto their office. And 4 chariots and 8 oxen he gave to the sons of Merav according unto their office under the head of Itamar, the son of Aaron the priest. But to the sons of Kohat he gave none, because the charge of the sanctuary belonged to them, meaning the responsibility, which they did bear upon their shoulders. Then the princes also offered in the dedication for the altar in the day that it was anointed. Then the princes offered their offering before the altar. And the Lord said unto Moshe, 1 prince one day, and another prince another day shall offer their offering for the dedication of the altar. So then on the first day did Nachshon, the son of Aminadab of the tribe of Yehuda, offer his offering. And his offering was a silver charger, meaning a tray, of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering. An incense cup of gold of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, an he-goat for a sin offering, and for peace offerings 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Nachshon, the son of Aminadab. The second day, Netaniel, the son of Zuar, prince of the tribe of Issachar, did offer, who offered for his offering a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, an incense cup of gold of 10 shekels, full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, and a he-goat for a sin offering, and for peace offerings 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Netaniel, the son of Zuar. The third day, Eliav, the son of Chelon, prince of the children of Zevulun, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekel weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, and a he-goat for a sin offering, and for peace offerings 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Eliav, the son of Chelon. The fourth day, Elizur, son of Shedeur, prince of the children of Reuven, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour, mingled with oil for a meat offering, a gold incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, and a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Elizur, the son of Shedeur. The fifth day, Shlumiel, the son of Zerishadai, prince of the children of Shimon, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour, mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Shelumiel, the son of Zurishadai. The sixth day, Eliasaph, the son of Deuel, prince of the children of God, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Eliasaph, the son of Deuel. The seventh day, Elishama, the son of Amiud, prince of the children of Ephraim, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Elishama, the son of Amiud. The 8th day offered Gamliel, the son of Pedazur, prince of the children of Manasseh. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour, mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Gamliel, the son of Pedazur. The 9th day, Abidan, the son of Gidon, prince of the children of Benjamin, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekel weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering. A golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering, 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Abidan, the son of Gidoni. The 10th day, Achiezer, the son of Shaddai, prince of the children of Dan, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekel weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering. A golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense. A young bullock, a ram, a lamb, of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering, 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Ahiezer, the son of Shaddai. The 11th day, Pagiel, the son of Okran, prince of the children of Asher, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for a peace offering, 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Pagiel, the son of Okran. The 12th day, the son of Enan, prince of the children of Naphtali, offered. His offering was a silver charger of 130 shekels weight, a silver bowl of 70 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, both full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, a golden incense cup of 10 shekels full of incense, a young bullock, a ram, a lamb of a year old for a burnt offering, a he-goat for a sin offering, and for peace offerings, 2 bullocks, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of a year old. This was the offering of Ahira, the son of Enan. Ahira, the son of Enan. This was the dedication of the altar by the princes of Israel when it was anointed. And here's that word, anointed. Mashiach, right? Messiah. 12 chargers of silver, 12 silver bowls, 12 incense cups of gold, every charger containing 130 shekels of silver, and every bowl 70. All the silver vessel contained 2,400 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. 12 incense cups of gold full of incense containing 10 shekels every cup after the shekel of the sanctuary. All the gold of the incense cups was 120 shekels. All the bullocks for the burnt offering were 12 bullocks, the rams 12, the lambs of a year old 12, with their meat offering, and 12 he-goats for a sin offering. And all the bullocks for the peace offerings were 4 and 20 bullocks, the rams 60, the goats 60, the lambs of a year old 60. This was the dedication of the altar after that it was anointed. And when Moshe went into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with God, he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony between the 2 cherubim, and he spoke to him. So that is that chapter. Wow. I'm going to just close that. Oof. Well, there's almost 2,000 people listening. That's really beautiful, especially considering this is not an easy chapter. This is not one of the ones that kind of trips off the tongue. Well, there you have the 12 tribes, right? And their respective place and meanings. And you've got the Levites, the priestly clan or tribe, with its special responsibilities toward the mercy seat, which is the Ark of the Covenant, with the golden cherubim on top. And this chapter at the end really does confirm my interpretation that I shared with you when we were reading in Exodus about the Ark of the Covenant, that it's so detailed, the instructions for creating the golden Ark of the Covenant and the golden cherubim on top and their wings outstretched to each other, that to me it seems like a technology, and like almost like a receiver, like a radio receiver. And for the first time, really, I mean, everyone's been around, not everyone, the priests have been around the Ark of the Covenant. Moshe has been in the altar, as I recall, but you haven't heard God's voice come out of the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of Witness, or the mercy seat, as it's called in the 16th century, as it's translated. And now you do. And this is, one more of these moments in the Hebrew Bible that is kind of erased or elided from organized religion. I would say in, modern Judaism, like Reform Judaism or conservative, which is very watered down in my view, now that I'm reading the actual Torah all the way through, but also, lots of other denominations, it is played down that God talks to humans, right? Directly, not through intermediaries, just very directly. And we talked about that yesterday, like God says to Moshe, say to the children of Israel, right? God says to Moshe, say to Aaron, to say to the children of Israel. It's a straight line. God is talking. And here we see the technology kind of working, I think, for the first time, after all these tribes had done exactly what God asked and made these offerings. And again, you remember the meaning to God of, that his children voluntarily making these offerings. You remember it from the golden calf. It really means a lot to him when people willingly, give to him. Again, not that he needs lambs or rams or, plates made out of silver, but because he knows they're important to humans. And so it's that kind of, it's like, if you've got a 5-year-old and the 5-year-old offers you his or her favorite toy, you don't need the toy, you probably won't take the toy, but it's very moving that your child offers their favorite toy, as opposed to just throwing in your direction something they're tired of playing with, right? Or that's broken. And so it really makes God happy when people willingly give things that are important to them to God. Again, not because he's greedy, but because he wants that relationship, of just like we do with our spouses. We want to give, and we want to have people give to us. We do, willingly, right? We want people to enjoy giving to us, and that's what God gets here, right? It's a big kind of party in which everyone's finally doing exactly what God wanted, willingly giving these, things that were very, very valuable in this nomadic society, livestock and precious metals and incense, which was also very valuable and rare. And, oil and flour, of course. So I guess the repetition, which I hope you felt was like relaxing rather than boring, right? Or kind of hypnotic almost. It really did, I feel, have a kind of poetic point, as well as a logical point. And the Chabad commentary stresses that the repetition also emphasizes the equality, that everyone is participating, everyone's participating exactly the same, and that's important. But I think that the repetition also stresses that when a community works together in alignment with God, what you end up with is riches, abundance. In this case, it's abundance for God, right? But God has made it clear that people who, are willing to happily offer things that are important to them will be blessed, right? Abundantly. So there's this sense with the repetition of like, silver being heaped up, and oil, and flour, fine flour being heaped up, and all these animals, right, being sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed. So many animals, and like desirable animals. Like in their first year, the meat is very tender, right? It's lamb, it's not mutton. And so you do get this sense, like at the end of Exodus, after the horrors of the golden calf, when the remnant of the children of Israel that had been faithful to God willingly gave their earrings and their jewels, to build the Ark of the Covenant, there was that sense of like a beautiful accomplishment. And it's not just beautiful, all this silver, at the end of Exodus, all this gold, but, all these animals, but it's also like a sense of, finally they're in harmony, right? It's a sense of order and abundance. When people work together, especially as a community in alignment with God, like anything's possible. So that's what I get from the repetition. There's a reason the author repeats like that. I don't know. The author didn't leave us a commentary. Maybe the author is God. I personally don't think God wrote this book with his hand. I think he inspired it in humans. Certainly Moshe was, I think, clearly a real person. And, we know the prophets were real, or likely to be real. We know the kings were real. That all comes later. We know David was a real person. He really built parts of Jerusalem, David's city. That comes later. But I think the repetition is about kind of a climax to this very, very, very difficult, arduous process of getting everyone organized, but not just practically organized. Okay, you're going to carry this, you're going to carry that, you're going to escort the tent and the altar, but also spiritually organized. It's not chaotic. Everyone is serving God together in exactly the way God asked. And I'm just going to remind you of the importance, of that, I shared this with you before, but it is really sticking in my mind, that when I went to Chabad and people who were not observant were talking about like, why keep kosher? Why not have a cheeseburger? Why not have shrimp? They're delicious. And the rabbi was very honest and said, we don't know. We can't answer in human terms why God wants that. And you remember I read to you that section in, I think, Numbers about, kosher food. It could be Leviticus. But, the rabbi said, we don't know, but he asked, because he asked for it. He gave us everything. He gave us life. He gave us everything we have. He gave us our children. He gave us our bodies, food every day, everything, with the opportunity to live and enjoy his blessings on this planet. So, he asked for it. So we do it because he gave us all this stuff. So that made sense to me. And as you may know, because I've shared it, I'm trying like kosher light. I'm trying to, do my little clumsy observance of that, which I'm finding actually makes a big difference to me personally. I'm not telling you what to do. But God asked for it. And so we don't know why. We don't know why God asked all these tribes to give all these things. He doesn't need incense. He doesn't need lambs. But I've given you my best interpretation. He needs love. He needs our love. He needs our generosity toward him. And it makes him happy. So it finally happened. And then you get this beautiful end of this chapter where, God actually talks to Moshe. And when Moshe would come into the tent of meeting to speak with him, he would hear the voice speaking to him from the two cherubim above the covering, which is over the Ark of the Testimony, and he spoke to him. So that's pretty mind-blowing, like God is so happy about all this kind of harmony in his will, right, in his relationship with these humans, that he literally comes down to the Ark of the Covenant between the cherubim, which, as you know, I thought is constructed like some sort of transistor of celestial or godlike, communication, and talks to Moshe in a voice coming out of the cherubim. It's right there. So pretty mind-blowing. I am not going to read I'm not going to read the Hebrew because A, it's long, B, it's repetitive. I'm going to see if there's any sentence that especially I should read. And then I'm going to look at the Revised Standard Version, which I haven't called up, to see if there's anything that we should call attention to that is different from what we're reading. And let's go ahead, and here's the Revised Standard Version. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the Hebrew. I'm going to call up the Hebrew on your screen. Well, I feel better already. All right, let's see. There's the Hebrew. So here you can see that it begins Bamidbar, in the desert. And I'll just read maybe the first paragraph and the last. Vayehi, and it was, Bayom Kalot Moshe Lehakim et Hamishkan, when Moses finished erecting or making to rise the Mishkan, which is the kind of dwelling, right, of God. V'yim sach ito, and he anointed it, right? That word, v'yim shachoto, I'm sorry, the same root as Mashiach, right? Messiah, anointed. He anointed it with oil, right? V'yikadesh oto, and he sanctified it, holy eyes did, as we've discussed. V'et kol kelav, and all his tools, right? All its vessels, like appliances, appurtenances. V'et ha-mizbeach, and the altar. V'et kol kelav, and all its vessels. V'yim shachem, and he anointed them. V'yikadesh otam, and he blessed them. He made them blessed. And then you go through all the chieftains. Interesting, in the Chabad, the word for those leaders is a chieftain. In the Geneva Bible, it was a prince. Let's see. V'yomer Adonai el Moshe nasi echad. So it could be prince or it could be chieftain, the word nasi. And here we have, interesting, it's not a bowl, but it's a kaf, or a spoon. So that's a difference. In the Geneva Bible, it's a silver bowl, and you've got all these people offering all this stuff. We're going to skip right on through to the end. And there you get that beautiful kind of climax of all this stuff. And then let's read line 89. Bebo Moshe, and in the coming of Moshe, El Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting, Ledaber ito, to speak with him. That's how casual it is, to speak with God, to speak with him. V'yishma et hakol, and he heard the voice. Midaber elav, speaking to him. Me'al hakaporet, from above the mercy seat. And they translate it from above the covering, which is over the Ark of the Testimony. HaKaporet, Asher al Aron HaEdut, which is on the Ark of Testimony, right? The literally closet or cabinet of witness. Mibein Shnei HaKruvim, from between the two cherubs. That word kruv is the root of cherub. It's the same, like cherub is like a rough translation of krub, or transliteration. Hakruvim, V'yidaber elav, and he spoke to him. And it's a little unclear in the Hebrew, that last V'yidaber elav, and he spoke toward him. Is it Moshe talking to God, or is it God talking to Moshe? And in Hebrew, you don't have capitalization or, uncapitalized letters, lowercase letters. It's all one case. So it's hard to tell whether God is speaking to Moshe or Moshe is speaking to God. But I think that's kind of the point. They're speaking to each other. It's very, very intimate. Let's see if there's anything in the Revised Standard Version that's very different. Let's see what we can learn from it. We'll share the screen of the Revised Standard Version. And you know that I, get upset about the Revised Standard Version. All right. They say the leaders of Israel. So Nasi is leaders here, heads of their father's houses. That's reasonable. It's a little less elevated and regal than Nasi, but it's fine. Everything is pretty much straightforward. The lamb, the flour, the tribes. Let's go down to the last section. The leaders of Israel, the cattle, and they say, this was the dedication offered for the altar after it was anointed. This was, they also, Zot Chanukat HaMizbeach. Yeah, this is the dedication for the altar after it was anointed. That's fine. Now let's see what they say at the very end. And when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony from between the two cherubim, and it spoke to him. It spoke to him. I mean, that's not really in the Hebrew. And the English translation here kind of presumes that it's the voice speaking to Moshe. And it's interesting that they translate it as it, which is quite, this is, again, I just hate it that organized religion just erases the immediacy of God every chance it gets. It's not it, right? It's God, it's he. In the Hebrew Bible, God is masculine, but it's a person. It's a person. It's not an it, right? God is not an it. So, and God's voice is not an it. So in the Hebrew, I'll show you again. Hedut mi ben shnei hakruvim, from between the two cherubs, vayidaber elav, and yidaber, and he spoke to him. He spoke to him in the Hebrew, not it. The Revised Standard Version, like in that iteration, that instant, just it spoke to him. Makes it, can you tell the difference as opposed to he spoke to him? It's so impersonal, and it's so like not like us. Whereas it's not human. It's an it. The voice is an it. It's totally disembodied. Whereas, excuse me, if it was an it in Hebrew, it would be ve diber ito, or vehakol diber ito, right? Or the voice spoke with him. But it's not. V'yedaber ito is, and he spoke with him. So I hope you can hear, I hope you are picking up what a difference it is to say, oh, did you talk to your best friend? Yeah, she called me, as opposed to, oh, did you talk to your best friend? Yeah, it made a phone call. Totally different. So that is our Torah lesson for today. Let's see what the comments are. I think people are explaining what we're doing to each other. Roscoe Christopher is there. I'm glad to see you, Roscoe Christopher. I think that's our Roscoe, who's been our friend for years and years. Let's see. Numbers 21, 4-9. KJV, foreshadow of the cross. 21. We're not at 21 yet, just so you know. It's simple. We look, we live, translated from the power of Satan to indwelled by the Holy Spirit. We have his love, joy, peace in our hearts. I'm happy, and I know that a lot of Christians read these texts in various places as foreshadowing the coming of Yeshua. And you're welcome to, of course. And there's lots of, as I've explained in the gospel, quotation of the Hebrew Bible, which was the Bible, right, at that time, that because the people who were around Yeshua and Yeshua himself knew the Bible, knew the Torah so intimately. And it's an interesting kind of discussion, because Jewish scholars and scholars who know Torah intimately often argue that the gospel writers were quoting or referencing the Torah, whereas a lot of Christians, like Donald Wortham, take the position that these texts in the Torah are foretelling Yeshua. And a lot of the commentary in the Geneva Bible, which is obviously a Christian interpretation, takes that point of view. I literally am agnostic. I mean, obviously, to me, it's important to read these texts in their context, and Yeshua didn't exist yet. So to these people, they would not have read these texts, or, for several thousand years into the future until Yeshua shows up, right? And the Gospels get written in the first century in Judea. Up until that time, Jews or the children of Israel would not be reading these texts with kind of preternatural foresight that they refer to something that's going to happen in the future. But you can interpret it that way. You can interpret these texts however you want. The beautiful thing is they can be read one way by people who are reading them as Jews, or as Jews would have read them, and they can be read another way by people reading them as Christians, kind of looking back in time from the vantage point of knowing that Yeshua came, and seeing, reading this or that passages foretelling the coming of Yeshua. And there's plenty there's plenty of prediction that a Messiah would come in the Hebrew Bible. It's a big part of the Jewish tradition, the Jewish religion, that God is going to send a Mashiach, and that the Messianic era will be upon us. It's right there. In fact, at Chabad tonight, when I went to synagogue, many of the prayers, which interestingly, the phrase is not there in the conservative and reform prayer books, same prayers, which is weird to me. I'll have to find out more about that. But they say, please bring the Mashiach. So obviously to those Jews, and I would say most Jews, Mashiach hasn't come yet, but our tradition promises that there will be one, that there will be a time of redemption, and a time when the kingdom of heaven is with us. Maybe Yeshua was the Mashiach that the Jewish scripture foretold, and, we missed it, in which case we should take another look. Maybe, he was someone else for us. I don't know. I think he's really important. Obviously, he changed, human history completely, and in this lineage of spiritual discovery and descent. But for sure, many Christians, especially those who've studied the Torah, see the messianic discourse in Judaism and in these holy scriptures as foretelling the birth of Jesus. And again, just to make this kind of circular, many biblical scholars will say, well, yes, the gospel writer talked about palms and a donkey because that was part of the messianic tradition. So people would recognize this as the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, because he's riding a donkey and there are palms on his arrival in Jerusalem. Or, they're going to tell a story in which they stress that he was 3 days on a cross because, the suffering servant was lifted up, I believe, in one book of the Hebrew Bible. So a lot of biblical scholars say the reason the gospel writers stressed or his descent from as a son of Jesse, a descendant of Jesse, who's in the lineage of David. The Messiah is supposed to come from the lineage of David, the psalmist, the king, son of Jesse. And so the gospel writers, have a what is it called, a genealogy that stresses that, Yeshua was from that lineage. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. We weren't there. The gospels don't all agree with each other. There's and many I'm not trying to freak you out, but by telling you that a lot of biblical scholars don't think any of these texts are like the literal word of God, right? Or infallible. They look at the context and they look at the storytelling and the mythologizing and what was happening. And they, take apart a lot of influences that go into the text. And they point out that the gospels don't all align with each other. So there isn't just one perfect text, right? For the New Testament, there certainly isn't one perfect text for the Old Testament. In fact, many Old Testament compilations don't even agree with each other because some books are in some and some books are out of others. The book of Esther is in, the book of Esther is out. Apocalypse, is in some New Testaments and not in other New Testaments. So these are, they for sure, I think, are divinely inspired texts, both of them, the Old and the New Testaments. But they, I think, and a lot of, scholars of both the Old and New Testaments believe that they also kind of filtered through imperfect human hands, affected by the storytelling, the tropes, the political situation around the scribes or the narrators or the writers at the time that they were written. That's, I don't know, that doesn't depress me. That's kind of God's conundrum for us. And I guess what I'm sharing with you, and I should really stop because we've talked for an hour, is in the Jewish tradition, which is also the Geneva Bible tradition, right? Because they're working from a Hebrew text and they wanted to rescue the Hebrew text for Christians. It is totally okay and desirable to delve in and analyze and wrestle with the text yourself. I mean, that's why the people who translated the Geneva Bible risked their lives hanging out in Geneva. They were English, they were doing it at the risk of their lives. Some of them lost their lives subsequently. They wanted everyone to have the unmediated word of God and commentary, in the margins, right? They wanted everyone to be able to wrestle with the text and not just sit there, no disrespect to the Catholic Church, and listen to a language they didn't understand. Most people did not understand Latin at that time, and kind of be presented with a ritual that they couldn't access, right? Or scripture they couldn't read. So I guess I will sign off by saying, I hope whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever, you take as, and I think Yeshua would have wanted you to if you're Christian, the Jewish tradition of here's the sacred text, wrestle with it, right? Like Jacob wrestling with the angel, analyze it for yourself, dig into it, right? Don't just sit there passively. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not be sure. It's okay to ask God. It's okay to ask scholars. It's okay to consult books, right? These are difficult texts and difficult contradictory stories, especially the Old and New Testament. They're aligned and they're contradictory, right? But instead of hating each other, which is where we're at, my friend Tucker Carlson, please rethink the message you're sending. We should be sending a message of this is all our tradition. We have riches for everybody, and go ahead and dive in and really, really wrestle with it, and ask God for illumination if there's something you don't understand. And it's okay to not get it, not be sure, to get tired, to struggle, to feel taken aback. Like, all of those are okay. These are, I think God would, from what I've seen of God, up till now in the Hebrew Bible and in the Geneva Bible, he'd rather you engaged and asked him than sat around and felt alienated. Okay, so that is the end of my talk and presentation for you. It's a great comment. Roscoe Christopher said, a text is read according to its interpretation. Literalism sucks all around. Well said. And Donald Wortham says, in the King James, which was translated in the year 1611, you have the 1611th mention of Lord in this verse, a sign from heaven. Well, you know a lot of detail about that, Donald Wortham. And let's see what else we've got. Let's see. Lots of comments from my friends. Lots of comments. My goodness, Roscoe, you're very chatty tonight. That's good. I just told you to be chatty. Let's see. Sandy Hardy, this is a nice one to end with. Jesus laid down his own life. As humans, we are responsible. We all have blood on our hands. That's why grace is such an amazing gift. And Uncle Rice said Yeshua laid down his life for humanity. And I read that comment. He could have called in the angels to rescue him. Well, these are very, uplifting Christian interpretations of Yeshua's life, and certainly what he said he was doing, right? So let's just end by saying, I'm not sure how to wrap this up, honestly. Like, I guess I should just say Happy Rosh Hashanah, and I hope you're getting something useful out of this. And if you're not sure, just keep going, keep digging. We're pushing through. I can't believe it's been over a year that we first started on this journey, and I've gotten so much out of it. I hope that you have too. And let me just end by saying, I started the day very, very, very sad at the viciousness and hatred that I was seeing toward, people of my faith. And I will end it hoping that you all see that it is, really one conversation. It's not exactly one faith, but it's one stream of faith. So on that note, Shana Tova, please support this project over at 1560 Geneva Bible, read by Dr. Naomi Wolf on Substack, and my Substack Outspoken. I really need subscribers in order to keep producing these videos. There's a whole team that helps me produce them. And it also helps me clear the decks, honestly, from other work. And then please support Daily Clout. And you can go over to legisector.com and billcam.com and subscribe there for an incredible tool that gives you total transparency for legislation, which I think is, in alignment with this whole conversation about humans and free will and our, making a beautiful society. So Shana Tova, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow, day 3 of the marathon, 1560 Geneva Bible. Take care, everybody.